Hello there, Andrew Laird from RotoWire here to talk about Friday's two-game Premier League slate. We're not going to have specific articles on it or podcasts because it's kind of a small one, even though the Saturday ones have been pretty small. But I thought it'd be a good time to talk about the cheat sheets that we have offered at RotoWire for all subscribers. They're kind of more stats-based with a bunch of odds. It's not player picks. We don't have like guys that you absolutely need to target, but it's kind of for those people who like to do some of their own research but don't necessarily have time to comb through box scores on different sites and whatnot. So if you head over to rotowire.com/soccer, we have everything that's on there. This is our regular rotowire.com/soccer homepage. If you just click this DFS button here, and then we have a link for all of our cheat sheets, and that's where you'll find every cheat sheet that we have for every slate on DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo. For any of the big European leagues, as well as Liga MX and MLS. We also have them for the Champions League and Europa leagues. So ideally, we have a cheat sheet for everything, whether it's a multi-game slate, interleague, all the showdowns. You'll find them all in this cheat sheet section. So you'll notice we already have some. We've got a Europa League going on today, so that's what those are here for. We do have one for Fantasy Premier League for anybody that plays a season-long game. Everything it's in our cheat sheets there. But we'll just click over to the one that we have for the DraftKings slate tomorrow. I skipped here is the EPL slate 11-6. So we've got a two-game slate with staggered start times, which we all know and love. But we got 12:30 Brighton at home against Burnley, and then 3 o'clock Eastern Southampton against Newcastle. A real powerhouse slate here. But really, what we're going to focus on are the different ways that you can use our cheat sheet in order to build lineups, both for cash games and GPPs. So if you just go down a little bit here, you'll notice that we have our expected lineups. We'll have the Brighton and Burnley lineups before lock, but obviously we don't have the Southampton Newcastle ones. Southampton are dealing with a few injuries that's going to make their lineup a little differently. One huge difference may be that James Ward-Prowse might be used as a left back because they're missing Ryan Bertrand. The Newcastle is mostly fit with Alan St. Maximin questionable. It sounds like he's going to play. But again, we don't really have to worry too much about the Brighton and Burnley lineups because we'll know those at the beginning, which is actually very beneficial because the Brighton set-piece situations is a little weird, which we'll get into. So we have our odds report here. These are just straight odds from FanDuel Sportsbook or DraftKings Sportsbook, whichever one we use for these. You'll notice that both home sides are favored. Not surprisingly, I mean, none of these teams are that good, and so it's, you side for the home side. Fairly low totals, which is going to put an emphasis on floor points in this one, which thankfully we have some pretty significant floor players that will be able to get us some points. So generally, you want to focus on favorites in cash games, certainly set piece takers on favorites. But because these games are kind of close, you can actually build a lineup with all 4 set piece takers if you want, depending on how the lineups shake out. So while I think most people will probably focus more on Brighton and Southampton, it's not like they're like a powerhouse defense, neither powerhouse defensive sides. So we can theoretically get plenty of players from both. So these are the anytime goal scorer odds. We get these from DraftKings Sportsbook as well. You'll notice in these yellow dots, those are the players that we expect to start. Danny Ings would probably be popular on this slate, certainly in GPPs. He had knee surgery this week, so he's going to be out, which opens up, theoretically, a cheaper spot in the starting 11 for one of their forwards. It sounds like Shane Long is going to be the guy who steps in. They could do a formation change as well, so Long is certainly not guaranteed. But that being the later game, also, you got to be a little more careful with that one in terms of building around somebody like Long, who, he seems like he's pretty close to the top of this list in terms of available guys and their goal odds. But you just have to be cognizant that plus 225 is really only a 30% chance to score, which isn't that great. Like I said, it's not expected to be a high-scoring slate, so we just want to be cognizant of that when we're building our lineups. So, guys like Neil Maupay, Callum Wilson. Wilson's on set pieces, is on penalties for Newcastle. He's already scored 3 of them this season. Maupay shoots them as well for Brighton. So Understandably, they have the best goal odds. They're not overly high, but they're going to be the high ones on this slate. And on a slate with only a few goals, you probably want the guys who will score them. So this is all broken out by. You can sort by team if you really want to see that. There's a filter you can do by position, who the salary guys are. I know one thing that people like to do is just kind of scroll for the cheap guys, the potential cheap goals. And we've got Chris Wood here at 5,200, which is actually pretty cheap. Obviously, he's a little more than Shane Long, but Wood's odds are slightly better to score. So those are the kind of things that people who look for goals in GPPs are going to be targeting. Cash games, all about free kicks, and we have a free kick tracker here, which takes into account all corners, free kick crosses, and free kick shots, because there are times where we see guys who are responsible for their team's free kick shots, but not necessarily on corners or anything. We see that at times with Lewis Dunk from Brighton. He used to take shots sporadically, but he was certainly never going to be on a corner or kind of a crossing situation. So what the free kick tracker does is it goes through the last few, or we can really see the entire season, at least for Premier League matches, and who has been taking them, how many they took, and the minutes they played. So if you look at this Brighton tracker, we'll just start there because it's at the top. Solly March and Pascal Gross split the set pieces last week. We don't expect them to start this match, but again, they're in the first game, so we'll know if they're in. Both of them could be popular. Gross particularly because he fills a forward spot. If neither of them start and we get this lineup correctly with Trossard and Lallana in, Trossard now fits into that forward spot, and theoretically he would be taking set pieces if we don't see Gross or March in. Although the further you go back, you'll see that March and Trossard have basically been sharing for the most part, and then Gross takes when he's on. So if Gross starts, we'll expect that there. And then Lallana kind of sporadically takes, mostly when these guys aren't playing. And Alexis McAllister is kind of the same way. He'll take them, but again, not expected to start, So Burnley's kind of the same. Two guys over and over again. It's Ashley Westwood and Dwight McNeil. You'll see that they don't have a seventh game yet. Burnley didn't play in game week 1. So this is not so much the game week as it is just the number of games they played, which is why this is 0. Just something to be cognizant of. Westwood has taken more than McNeil this season, but McNeil is certainly much more of an open play crosser, which we'll get to in the stats section below. But those guys are definitely going to be considered for cash games and GPPs, really, because you're going to need points anyway if there are not a lot of goals. So McNeil 6,600 as a forward possibility, and then Westwood 5,600. I think both are fine plays on the slate in cash games just because we're going to need those points from somewhere. And then just scrolling down, we've got Newcastle. They obviously have had a number of people take set pieces this season. John Joe Shelby, Ryan Fraser, and Matt Ritchie are all out injured. So we saw Sean Longstaff take last week. Expectation is if he's in again, he'll probably take them, with Miguel Almiron and Jeff Hendrick, kind of long shot guys who sporadically taken some, probably by accident or maybe at the end of the game where they just kick one in, to get it on, get the ball in. So there are possibilities, but I think Longstaff is generally going to be the guy there. And then James Ward-Prowse just dominates set pieces for Southampton. And the only other guy to take a corner or free kick cross this season for Southampton is Ryan Bertrand, who's out. So the expectation is that JWP is going to get everything, and you can just go from there. So for cash games, I mean, the salaries really aren't all that crazy. And going through, you could get one guy from each team. You could take the set pieces from each team, Trossard and McNeil in forward spots, and you got Longstaff and Ward-Prowse as midfielders. Ward-Prowse pricey at 9,000, but frankly, with the other guys fairly cheap, you don't really need to worry about that. So if you keep scrolling down, we've got these are the player stats averages per 90 minutes for this season. They're initially sorted by shots, so you'll see Maupai at 3.17 shots per game. Shots per 90, 1.5 on goal. So it gets him, we essentially just calculate these per 90 averages into the fantasy points column. And then the floor points are all of the fantasy points minus goals and assists. And the floor is really what you want to focus on for cash games because you don't want to have to depend on goals, which are pretty variant. Even if the players that we expect to score, generally the ones that do score, the goals just don't happen all the time. So all of these columns are sortable. So when I mentioned earlier the floor points, there's Pascal Gross right there, averaging a ton of crosses and a ton of chances created. When he takes set pieces, but you'll notice he only has played 162. Excuse me. This season. So we got Ward-Prowse, unsurprisingly. And you'll find the set piece takers kind of in the upper tier of this group when you scroll by floor points. Sort by floor points, excuse me. And then you can kind of get the guys who are going to score anyway. Alan St. Maximin, almost 10 floor points a game, significant amount coming from fouls drawn, which are a fine stat to use. I mean, obviously those points count. It's interesting, or it's important to remember that, like, you want to get floor points, but it's more beneficial to get floor points from categories that have upside. And so if you have somebody who crosses a lot, crosses can become chances created, and chances created can become assists. And guys who take a lot of shots can turn into goals. You have to take a shot in order to score a goal. You have to create a chance to get an assist. So those are really the points that you want to focus on. Fouls suffered are obviously great because you get the points themselves. It's just something to be cognizant of in terms of like the upside that you might get from these players. So like I said, you'll see the guys that we have indicated at the top. All those yellow, those will turn green when the lineups are confirmed about an hour before kickoff. Now again, we'll get the Brighton match early, but the Newcastle will come later. So you'll see kind of in the middle of the slate, you'll see that we have some green dots and yellow dots, and that's just because those lineups haven't been confirmed yet. So you can just use this however you want. If you want guys that shoot a lot, you have them here. Again, we have fairly small sample sizes so far, but that's just something that we have to be aware of. But I mean, these are the stats that have been accumulated so far. So we've got the more defensive guys. We'll get the tackles won and the interceptions. They tend to be cheaper, so if you want to just use them, if you're going to punt someone, you might as well punt on somebody who's actually scoring some points as opposed to just a total guess. And then the bottom of our cheat sheets have two different team stats. One is how much the teams themselves are averaging, and then how much they're allowing. So generally, I mean, it's only a 2-game slate. So, when you say like Burnley across the most on this slate, like 20.5 crosses per game isn't really that much, but it's the most on this slate. And so that's kind of something we have to be aware of. And the same with like Brighton is averaging 12.2 shots per game, 12.3. Newcastle not shooting as much. But then you look on the other side, Newcastle is also giving up a lot of shots. So they're allowing 16.7 shots per game, which is obviously the highest on the slate. They're giving up a ton of crosses. So maybe they're the team that you want to target. So when we have bigger slates, obviously these stats come in, have a little more context, but at least we have them for this slate so we know where the teams stand. So theoretically, if you're looking for the team who's given up the most shots, we have Newcastle here. Brighton is taking the most shots. They're playing Burnley, who don't give up a lot, but again, it's not that bad. So generally, what you can do is just pick off certain guys that you want in this range, and then just go to work from there. So if you actually go to our lineup optimizer, you can lock them in on this slate and just see kind of what works around them. So one thing I like to do with our optimizer is instead of using the projections, I'd actually just stick to the floor points, which is what we did. I mean, I generally play cash games. You can do their full average points per 90, but I use the floor points. So if you just apply this model, now their floor points will be included as their projections in the optimizer. Excuse me. So here, I mean, we can just lock in the guys that the set piece takers if you want, and just see what happens from there. So we've got James Ward-Prowse. We have Trossard, who we probably want to use in a forward spot, and we can lock him in. And then who else do we have? We had McNeil. Comes down here. We'll use him in a forward spot, and you can lock him in. And let's see, Trossard, Ward-Prowse, McNeil. We need the Newcastle, so Longstaff, where we can just search, because I'm just going to aimlessly search here. All right, we can lock Longstaff in. And then what I like to do is actually create like a few different lineups just to kind of get an idea of what types of players fit in. Now, again, this is pretty much not taking into the goal, so you're not going to get a lot of goal scorers when you try to make these lineups. But it'll at least give you an idea of the players that are in the ranges of who you should be considering. So we obviously have our locked-in guys here, Longstaff, Ward-Prowse, and the 2 forwards. So we can see we can afford St. Maximin, who we saw has a very good floor from the cheat sheet. And then Bernardo, Fabian Schär, who's a kind of a sneaky good floor play just because he is a center back, not really a position we usually play. And then Bernardo might start out wide, at least as a fullback for Brighton, or even as a wingback, excuse me, if we get that. So, it's just the types of players that you can do, and you can obviously exclude them and rerun it. If you look at somebody like Bernardo, and you're just like, I have no interest in Bernardo, you can just exclude him, and then he'll be excluded from all these lineups, and then all you have to do is refresh it, and it'll give you 5 more lineups. And this is kind of how I use an optimizer every so often. It just kind of gives you the idea of the guys that are going to be in the ranges. So you have, Charlie Taylor here, who's a decent crosser for Burnley. I think on this slate you could probably play any defenders you want, particularly if you pay down at goalkeeper. This is telling us to go with Carl Darlow, who's only 4,200. Again, in a slate that doesn't have much goal upside, really anyone can win here. So paying up for goalkeeper seems like it's a little crazy. But if you're somebody who really doesn't want any of the center backs, you can take Schär out. My guess is it's going to give us another one because the fullbacks really aren't heavy crossing fullbacks on this slate, particularly since we're losing out on Bertrand. So here we got Phil Bardsley. We'll get a little Burnley defensive stack here, which is what we always really want in the slate. But anyway, you can go in, you can play around with it. These are the kind of the salary ranges that you're going to be in. And when you scroll down here, all of the players are here with their floor points. So you can sort by that, and you just keep going through and playing around. And this is kind of how I build a lot of my lineups, how a lot of people build lineups. GPPs, obviously, you could start locking in guys that you think will score. You could even boost their projected points if you think they're going to, if you want to play that game. And it just gives you an idea, and you can just keep working on it until you come down to a lineup you like or a few lineups you like. So that's all I got for now. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on Twitter at RotoWireAndrew. Also available in our RotoWire subscriber Discord, which is open for all subscribers. Just go to rotowire.com/chat to get in there. If you are not a subscriber and want to try all this out, because all of this is for subscribers, you can just go to rotowire.com/pod, P-O-D, to get 10 free days to the site. You have access to everything, including that Discord. No credit card required. So try that out. Come join us, and good luck.